So there has been a lot of talk and interest in Greenland and the Arctic recently. And if you listen to the news, it sounds like NATO is in charge of the Arctic, but that's actually not true. I have a lot of weird experience in this region because I actually used to do research in the Arctic, and I actually co-authored a report about ice melting in the Arctic and how that's leading to an increase in shipping and what the effects of that are on marine mammals, and how that's going to just keep increasing as ice melts. And this is one of the reasons some people think that Greenland has become so important geopolitically, is what is going to happen as the ice melts and there's suddenly a lot more shipping lanes open in the Arctic. So I'm going to break down who's actually in charge of the Arctic in case you're interested, because it is a very complex region in terms of laws because there are so many countries so close together, and it is a region that is dramatically increasing in area as the ice melts, and so the laws are changing all the time. Okay, so the leading intergovernmental forum kind of controlling the Arctic and promoting cooperation specifically in the Arctic is called the Arctic Council. The Arctic Council has been around since the early 90s, and it is made up of 4 groups. The first group is the 8 Arctic states that make up the Arctic Circle. So these are the 8 Arctic states. It is the United States, because Alaska's in the Arctic, Canada, Denmark, because Greenland is owned by Denmark, cannot emphasize that enough, Iceland, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, and then Russia. And you can see why people do get concerned about Russia, because they are like half of the Arctic Circle. So those are the 8 countries that their laws govern the region and they implement policy in this region. In that whole circle, there are only 4 million people. That is not a lot of people. There's like just under 4 million people in the city of San Diego. So there's not a lot of people that live there because it is very, very cold, very, very icy. Okay, so the first group of people in the Arctic Council are the 8 Arctic states. Then there are 6 permanent participants in the Arctic Council. You can see their logos here. They're like really small, sorry. They represent the indigenous people groups of the Arctic. That's because a lot of those 4 million people are indigenous people groups. They always have a seat at the table. Then there are 38 observers, and these observers do not get to implement policy, but they get to provide expertise. So there are 13 of those observers are non-Arctic states. So these are non-Arctic countries, but that have Arctic interests, whether that is shipping, fishing, science, whatever. So these include Germany, France, Italy, Singapore, Spain. They get to be there. Then there are 13 other observers that are intergovernmental organizations. So this includes the International Maritime Organization, which I will talk about later, UNEP, which is the United Nations Environmental Program, the United Nations Developmental Program, a lot of groups like that promote a lot of international cooperation. And then there are 12 NGOs that are observers, like WWF and Oceania. I worked with WWF in the region. So those are kind of the groups at the table, those groups, but really the work gets done in these 6 working groups. Most of those working groups have to do with conservation, but then there are also groups, the Arctic Council Action Plan, the Emergency Prevention, Preparedness, and Response Group that works on things like shipwrecks, blizzards, storms, things like that. The Sustainable Development Working Group, they work on international development, working on education, women's development, all that kind of stuff, especially with the indigenous peoples groups. Nothing that the Arctic Council does is actually like binding law. It is all kind of suggested policy, as all international policy kind of is. But it's really like to promote cooperation in the region. And how their leadership works is there is the Arctic Council, and then every 2 years, a different one of the 8 Arctic states is the Arctic Council Secretariat, and they are in charge. And right now, who is in charge? It's Denmark, which I find a little bit funny that as all this is happening, Denmark is actually the ones who are in charge of the Arctic Council. Okay, I'm going to stop this video, and then I'm going to start another video and tell you about the specific other laws in the region.